What an awesome opportunity to be here. B'makom nuchasai shalhai tzaddik v'gaver Rabbi the Chasam Sofer Moshe Sofer. Moshe Sofer lived 77 years from 1762 to 1839. But instead of giving just biographical information, I want to give you a little bit of a flavor for the personality and the avas haTorah of the Chasam Sofer by sharing with you one of his themes in his writing. And from learning these particular Divrei Torah, I think we'll get a little bit of a flavor of the Cheshkas HaTorah and the Avas HaTorah of the Chasam Sofer. In many of the Sefer Chasam Sofer, which there are many, there's a Taras Moshe al HaTorah, there's Chasam Sofer al HaTorah, many different editions. Chasam Sofer is bothered with a question, and when you hear this question, you'll instinctively feel the burning love of Torah of Chasam Sofer. Chasam Sofer wants to know. It says in the Navi Yirmiyah, "La'asid lavai v'lo yalamdu oid ish esreyayo v'yishas achiv leimar du es Hashem." La'asid lavai. Nobody will need to teach their friend Torah. Why? Ki chulam yedu aisi l'miktana v'yad gedolam. They will all know me from young to old. Noam Hashem. And as we know, the Navi predicts for the end of days, so as Chasam Sofer in a number of places, in his drashos, in Chelek Aleph, page Yud Zayin, Chelek Aleph, page Yud Ches, and in many other places, the Chasam Sofer wants to know, so how la'asid lavai will we be mekayim the mitzvah of teaching Torah? If everyone will know Torah, how are we going to be mekayim this mitzvah? We're going to lose the great opportunity of harbatzas Torah? You almost feel the worry in the Chasam Sofer's heart. How will we be marbetz Torah? If everybody knows HaKadosh Baruch Hu and everyone knows the Torah, how will we be marbetz Torah? Only someone who loves the Torah so much and loves being marbetz Torah could have that worry in their heart. Well, what's going to be when Mashiach comes? How will we be marbetz Torah then? And he explains we'll have to be marbetz Torah to the Gentiles. And then in elsewhere he says, well, they too will convert. We'll have to be marbetz Torah by teaching the Malachi Hasharis. But you sense in the worry of the Chasam Sofer, how will we be marbetz Torah? Well, in fact, if you look in the drashas in Chelek Aleph on Daf Yud Ches, Chasam Sofer writes, "Thank the Rebbeinu Shalom for the last 40 years. I have not ceased teaching Torah every single day. I did not allow one day to go by without teaching Torah." And in fact, in the Pituchei Chasam, in the Hakdama of Reb Shimon Sofer to the Shal Teshuvos Chasam Sofer on Yoredeya, Reb Shimon Sofer writes that from the time the Chasam Sofer was 18 years old until he was 78, kamat for 60 years, he taught Torah every single day to his Talmidim. Even Leil Yom HaKippurim he taught to his Talmidim. This was the life, desire, and ambition of Chasam Sofer, harbatzas HaTorah. So above and beyond all of his great accomplishments and achievements, first of all, he was the great Meishiv. I heard from Rav Noach Isaac Obam, Chasam Sofer encompassed 3 roles for Klal Yisrael. Number 1, he was a great Meishiv. He responded to tshuvas from all over the world. Number 2, he was a great Rosh Yeshiva. He headed one of the greatest yeshivas in Europe, the yeshiva in Pressburg, in its heyday, had over 500 Talmidim, was the great centers of harbatzas Torah in the world, and he was a Rav of a Kehillah. Each one of those responsibilities could occupy one's entire existence. And the Chasam Sofer was able to combine all 3. But primarily, Chasam Sofer was the quintessential, preeminent marbetz Torah. Now, just share with you, Chasam Sofer was the primary disciple of Rav Nosson Adler. Rav Nosson Adler, 1741 to 1800, and he entered Rav Nosson Adler's yeshiva at 9 years old. And Chasam Sofer's knowledge was so extraordinary that even Reb Pinchas Horowitz, the Hafla, who also was his Rebbe, requested that the Chasam Sofer come learn from him. But the Chasam Sofer served Rav Nosson Adler faithfully. He says, my hand was not removed from his hand, my entire opportunity that I had with him. Now the Chasam Sofer married his first wife, but as the marriage was about to happen, Chasam Sofer found out and discovered that his first wife had been previously married with no children. And he asked his Rebbe, his family wanted him to break the engagement, and he sent a letter to Rav Nosson Adler, and he did not get a response in time. He took that as a siman min hashamayim that the Rebbeinu Shalom wants him to go through with it, and Chasam Sofer was not blessed with children with his first wife. Chasam Sofer became a Rav in Strasnitz, Then in 1797 he was appointed the Rav of Mattersdorf, and ultimately he established a yeshiva there. And there in Mattersdorf, one of his primary Talmidim was Maharam Ash. Just to give you a list of some of the Talmidei Chasam Sofer, you have Rabbi Yehuda Asad, who wrote Shas Tshuvas Yehuda Asad, Rav Shmuel Ehrenfeld, the Chasam Sofer, Rav Hillel Kalamaya. Rav Hillel Kalamaya was a great Magid. You have the Maharam Shik, also one of the great Talmidim of the Chasam Sofer. You have, of course, we'll talk about his son, Rav Ram Shmuel Ben Yamin Sofer, the Ksav Sofer, and Rav Chaim Sofer, the Machne Chaim. His first wife dies childless in 1812. Then the Gabbai comes to the Chasam Sofer. He says, Chasam Sofer, I have a great shidduch for you. The daughter of the Gadol Hadar, Rabbi Akiva Eiger's daughter. So Chasam Sofer says, of course, that would be tremendous, but why would the Gadol Hadar want to be Meshadech to an Am Haaretz? So the Shamish went to Rabbi Akiva Eiger and said, I have a great shidduch for your daughter. Yeah, how about the Chasam Sofer? Rabbi Akiva Eiger says, great idea, but why would the Gadol Hadar want to be Meshadech with the daughter of an Am Haaretz? So the Shamish said, well, this is a beautiful shidduch, an Am Haaretz to Bas Am Haaretz. And that's how he was able to make the shidduch. Now, the Chasam Sofer was much, much older than Rabbi Akiva Eiger's daughter. However, he had 10 children from her. He had 3 sons, all Talmidei Chachamim Muflagim, and 7 daughters, and this is where the great dynasty of the Chasam Sofer really came from. I'll just tell you, we know the Chasam Sofer fought very valiantly against the Reform movement. He spoke out against Aaron Horn, and he mocked his lack of Torah knowledge. The Chasam Sofer's famous pun that he created, that he coined, was Chadash Asar Min HaTorah. Anything new in Judaism is prohibited. Any deviations, any changes, any innovations, Chadash Asar Min HaTorah. Anything new is prohibited from the Torah. Now, I want to share with you, just to bring out more the philosophy of the Chasam Sofer of Harbatzas HaTorah. We know, V'ahavta l'reacha kamoicha Amar Rabbi Akiva ze klal gadol b'Torah. This is a great principle in the Torah. Why does Rabbi Akiva use this term, ze klal gadol b'Torah? This is a great principle in the Torah. He should say, ze klal gadol. This is a great principle. Why does Rabbi Akiva say, ze klal gadol b'Torah? Obviously it's in the Torah. It's not in the telephone book. He should say, ze klal gadol. Says the Chasam Sofer in a number of places. This is Rabbi Akiva l'shitase. We're going to explain. What does he mean this is a great principle in the Torah? You have to love your friend like yourself? Wait a second. No, Rabbi Akiva says, V'chei achicha imach, chayecha koidem. We know the rule is if you're walking in the desert with 1 pitcher of water and there's only enough for either you or for your friend, otherwise whoever doesn't get the water will die, you drink the water yourself. Chayecha koidem, you come first. So why does Rabbi Akiva say you have to love your friend like yourself? No, you come first. So the love for yourself is greater than your friend. Says the Chasam Sofer, this is exactly what Rabbi Akiva is teaching. That when it comes to gashmios, physical life, you don't love your friend like yourself. You love yourself more. But when it comes to Torah, when it comes to spirituality, you have to love your neighbor like yourself. Says the Chasam Sofer, you have to give up your own ruchnios to infuse ruchnios into your friend. Which means that if I'm in the middle of learning and somebody comes to learn with me, I have to give up my own Torah to teach someone else. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. When it comes to Zeklal Gadol b'Torah, in Gashmios, I love myself more. In ruchnios, in Torah, then it's v'ahavta l'reacha kamoicha. And in fact, the Chasam Sofer says so beautifully that the Navi Yeshaya says about Avraham Avinu, Avraham oihavi, Avraham who I love. That God says, of all the people in this world, who do I love? Avraham. We don't find any description of love that Rebbe Shalom had to any other human being other than Avraham. What was it about Avraham that the Rebbe Shalom loved so much? Also the Chasam Sofer asks a phenomenal question. In Parshas Vayera, it seems like Hashem is vacillating. Should I hide from Avraham what I'm about to do? So it almost seems like Hashem wants to tell Avraham he's going to destroy Sodom, but Hashem says, maybe I shouldn't tell him. And then Hashem says, no, but how could I hide it from him? We don't find anywhere in the whole Chumash that Hashem says, should I tell Moshe? Should I not tell Moshe? All right, I'm going to tell him. Should I tell Yeshaya? Should I not tell him? Okay, I'm going to tell him. It almost seems like Hashem was unsure whether to tell Abraham, and ultimately Hashem decided to tell him. Says the Chasam Sofer, because Abraham had this characteristic of Harbotzas Torah, where he gave up his own personal ruchnias to bring other people closer to God. Now, in order to be a prophet, you need to go into seclusion and meditate and contemplate and come close to Hashem. And if you don't do that, you simply cannot get the prophetic connection to God. Avram Avinu simply did not have the luxury to sit in his tent and contemplate and connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because he dedicated all of his energies to go out, to serve meat to the guests, to give them mustard, and to speak to them about what they're interested in. He simply did not have the luxury to contemplate the existence and the connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Avraham technically was not on a higher level of prophecy. In fact, the Netziv that we were at yesterday quotes this Chasam Sofer, that when Chazal say that Avraham was secondary to Sarah in Nevuah, it means for this reason, that Sarah had the luxury to sit in her tent and commune and contemplate HaKadosh Baruch Hu and connect. Avram Avinu was out in the fields and the campuses connecting with other Yidden. He didn't have the opportunity to connect with Hashem. So technically speaking, Hashem couldn't tell him the Nevuah. If you don't go through the preparation of prophecy, you can't get prophecy. And therefore Hashem was hesitant to tell Avram Avinu. But says the Heilige Chasam Sofer, Hashem recognized that the only reason Avram Avinu did not prepare himself is because he gave up his own ruchnios to help other Yidden. And therefore we learn from here a great principle, that when a person gives up of his ruchnios to teach others, Hashem says, you're doing it for my sake, you will teach others, and I'll give you as a gift all the spirituality that you could have achieved had you had the freedom and the luxury to study and to contemplate. And therefore Hashem says, even though I can't tell Abraham, I have to tell Abraham, because Abraham gives up of himself for the sake of others to bring them tachas kanfei Hashchina, and that is why more than anyone else, Abraham is Abraham Oyavi. And we could say, Ru'uyim Hadvarim L'misha Amram. This was the life of the Chasam Sofer. Chasam Sofer gave up of himself to paskin shailas, to help the community, and to teach Talmidim. And the amount of Torah that he was able to bring down to this world, despite all of his responsibilities, is just an illustration of this concept, that because he gave up of himself, he was the conduit to bring down Torah's Moshe to Klal Yisrael. He was a Raya Neman. He simultaneously fought any innovations in Judaism and was able to elevate all of Klal Yisrael. Until this very day, we are all elevated from the Torah of the Heilige Chasam Sofer, Zechusa Yagin Aleinu.